Welcome back to Just Disciple. You know, guys, we usually come on here and talk about prayer and discipleship. And today we've got something that may be a little bit more spicy than that. And my name is Brooks. I'm one of the hosts of the Just Disciple YouTube channel. And I'm here with Kenny Ortiz, a professor of theology at Bethany Global University and pastor at Cities Church. I just felt like introducing you today.
Thanks.
You haven't got a good introduction in a while.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So here's the spicy topic. You probably already know because you look at things before you click on them. But we're going to talk about aliens. Specifically, you guys, do you know that meme? Like I don't know. What is that? Like the aliens meme? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't know. You don't. Do you guys know what
you're some like history. Yeah, it was like History Channel thing or something like that. Yeah, the guy with the big hair. Well, anyways, we're talking about aliens today. Are there aliens in the Bible? What does the Bible say about aliens? So, we're breaking out our conspiracy theory hats. I saw Kenny walk in with some tinfoil on his head. So, why were you wearing the tinfoil?
Side note, I read an article not too long ago from The Atlantic talking about 48% of Americans at least believe one thing that's considered a conspiracy theory. So, yeah, if you believe at least one, you're you're run-of-the-mill American. I don't know that I believe it.
We don't believe in aliens, guys. That's not us. We're just messing with you. Listen, we're not breaking out the conspiracy theory hats. That's not exegesis. We're here to look into the Bible and ask, what does the Bible say about this topic?
Right. So God creates human beings as the governors of the earth, right, and all of creation.
Yeah.
And so we were talking about this before we started recording, and you used a great term that I thought was helpful. And you said that human beings are the pinnacle of God's creation. Can you unpack that, and how does that relate to the question of aliens?
Yeah, so we see that God created in 5 days all things in creation, and then on the sixth day, he took the whole day to create man. And man was the most unique thing that God created because God created them in his own image. And so because God created them in his own image, you can see a clear difference between day 6 and days 1 through 5 in the things that are being created. And God looks over everything and calls it good. But the bigger thing that we see is that God gives humans the responsibility to govern over his creation. And then if you look through the Bible is the story of the redemption of humanity. God electing a people for himself and setting his electing love on them, and it's the story of God redeeming them through the death of his son. And so the whole story of creation, which is what the Bible gives us, is a story revolving around God, but around God's love for his people. And so we see that humans have a very unique place in God's creation. And the Bible is not just a story about God's work on earth. Like we mentioned, in the first 5 days that we have, God creates the entire universe, all of the known, visible, all of the universe, all of the physical universe. And so from the Bible, I think we can say humans are the pinnacle of God's creation. And
the masterpiece,
right,
so to speak.
The masterpiece of God's creation, and the only thing that God created that was made in his own image.
Right.
We can say that confidently. So if there are some aliens or something like that, I mean, which I don't believe there are, we'll talk more about that in a minute, but if there are, we know for sure that they are not made in the image of God. It wouldn't make any sense with the story of creation for an alien to exist that is like man, that is like human. And so the majority of the iterations of aliens that we see in movies or sci-fi or books or whatever, it's not a realistic picture of what aliens could be at all. I think there's a zero possibility that exists. Is there a possibility that something else exists? Very slim. Biblically, I mean, we're looking at the story of redemption. I don't think it makes sense for there to be something else. But maybe it's a small chance. What would you say?
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't make sense to me in light of human beings being the governors of God's creation, that God would then also make other created beings that are intelligent like humans, that have will and emotion and souls and the ability to communicate the way humans can communicate. The fact that God would do that elsewhere seems counter what we see the purpose for humanity overseeing creation within this, within the world in which we live. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. Is it possible that there's some things out there,
I guess, bacteria on Pluto or something like that?
I mean, there are things that could be considered life living on other planets, right? So it's possible. But the reality is the probability of there being intelligent life biblically feels like it's zero. And then also there's been a great project that's been managed by NASA and some other agencies from the 1960s until today for the last 60 years. It's called SETI, S-E-T-I. You can Google that if you like. It's a massive project run by NASA. When it was first launched, the project was trying to design to figure out, are there intelligent life beings outside of our solar system on other planets and other galaxies? And there was a lot of confidence from scientists at NASA. And basically the consensus over the last 60 years has become that there's actually almost zero chance. The most recent estimate is something like it's 1 in 40 quadrillion. I mean, it's like these ridiculous odds, the fact that there being the possibility that there's out there. However, there are people living on planet Earth that do say they've had encounters with creatures or beings or things that they may think is alien. And so if you and I are sitting here saying we're looking at the biblical evidence and even the scientific evidence, the consensus, and we're saying there's no such thing as aliens, but there's people saying they've had encounters that are like aliens, what do we do about that?
Right, yeah. I mean, biblical evidence leaves very little room for belief in aliens. And then, take that outside of the Bible, like you're mentioning the CD Project. Even the physical evidence, the scientific evidence leaves very little room. So if someone comes and they're thinking, I had some kind of alien encounter, that could mean so many different things. And it could mean they saw some kind of unidentified object in the sky. They don't know what it is. It could be that they feel like they've been abducted, or that they don't remember being abducted, but they feel like they've seen things on their bodies, and there's different things. It could mean a million different things. So you can't I can't broad brush what the response should be. But I would say I don't believe that the way that you're interpreting your experience is correct. I don't believe that the way you're interpreting either the thing that you saw or the thing that you felt or the thing that you think you remember you experienced, I don't believe that is probably the best interpretation, even though it might be completely understandable why you believe that. And sometimes it's hard to discern and weave through lots of different complicated memories that we have and where they came from. Was it a dream? Was I on acid? I don't know. There's a million possibilities here of where this could have come from. And one of them is also that we face reality of that there is not just a physical realm, but a spiritual realm. And there are forces of darkness that work in the spiritual realm and that seek to deceive us and seek to cause fear. And so I think my recommendation to someone who's saying, I think I've experienced some kind of alien encounter is, hey, talk to your pastor about that. Get some outside help interpreting the things that you saw, working through those in your mind. Don't let that be something you go through alone, because that's already something no one else thinks that they've done. So if you're going through it alone, it's going to make it way more difficult for you, and I think you're going to get even further into your head. And you need to be grounded back into reality with the help of your pastors and your friends and fellow Christians in the church. So that would be my response.
So you're saying if someone has experienced something that they feel like was an alien encounter or an abduction or something like that, it is possible that they've simply misinterpreted the data of what actually happened for a whole host of reasons. Or it's entirely possible that the experience was very real, but it was not with an alien from another planet, but it was actually with a demonic force or principality of some sort.
Right. We tend to trust our experiences, especially in this Western culture, experience as a source of knowledge. But in reality, our experience is not a great source of knowledge, because we always have to interpret our experiences, and we, as fallen human beings, interpret our experiences very poorly very often. And so I would say your experience is not a great source of knowledge, and it needs the Bible to help you understand what you experienced.
You touched on something a moment ago that I think is helpful to also remember, is that those of us live in the West, we feel the need to construct the logical arguments and explanations. People who live in the East, people who live in, whether it's Asia or parts of Africa, or even some parts of Latin America, in some cases, in more rural or remote parts of Latin America, people have a much more spiritual view of the world. It's very normal for people in the East to really believe that there's a spiritual realm, and many times they have more confidence in the spiritual realm's impact on their lives than they do even the physical realm.
That's true.
In the West, we don't. So if we have an encounter with something, we're going to go, well, it must be a physical alien from another planet. Where if you were living in most parts of Asia and you had an experience, you would immediately assume this is some sort of spirit from a spiritual realm that transcends the material realm in which we live. And we often might use the word demons to describe that, but that might not be the best word necessarily in our English language, or maybe other words. But regardless, the Bible uses words like principality or powers or demons. Like these are all words the Bible uses. So if you've had an encounter, as Brooks said, I would encourage you to see your pastor. Maybe your pastor can introduce you to a great Christian counselor that can help you kind of navigate through that.
Right. If you have a friend who's had an encounter, you recommend that to them as well.
Yeah.
So there's one other thing we want to talk about. There are people who have looked at the Bible in various places and they say, oh, I think this is an alien. I think this is some kind of otherworldly thing. Is this evidence for it in the Bible? What would you say to those people? What are they talking about usually, and what would you say to them?
Yeah, usually it's Genesis chapter 6. So people typically want to say aliens are real and aliens are actually the product of relations between demons and humans. That's a common belief that's thrown out there. It kind of was birthed in the middle part of the 20th century. And so there in Genesis chapter 6, it talks about this group called the Nephilim or Nephilim, or there's different ways to pronounce that word, I've heard it. So the Nephilim, this group of people in Genesis chapter 6, Moses is writing about them, and it says, the Nephilim were in the land. They were living in the promised land. They're in this region of the world. And they were living there at the same time when the sons of God, and the ESV renders it, entered into the daughters of men. And so when these sons of gods had sexual relations with these daughters of men, that's the same time period where these Nephilim were living at the same time. Now, some people, it's a relatively common belief amongst evangelicals, is that the Nephilim are actually the byproduct, or they are the product of it. So these sons of God, these angelic creatures, maybe demons or demonic creatures, were having sexual relations with human women, and they had babies that were, for lack of better terms, half demon, half human. Is that a right way to say it? I don't know. But partly supernatural, partly human. And that the Nephilim were actually the ones that were born out of that. But Genesis 6 doesn't literally say that. It just says the Nephilim were living in the same time period as the moment that the sons of God and the daughters of men had sexual relations. And so whether the Nephilim are actually part of it. So some people, I think people go, okay, there's aliens. There seems to be evidence for aliens. And what people end up doing is they look in the Bible for something to corroborate what they're experiencing. And I think that's a very dangerous way to approach Scripture.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it misses it when you look at Genesis 6 or any passage that way. You're very liable to miss the entire point of the passage, because that if you're looking there and you're seeing aliens, it's not at all what the passage is even talking about. You're missing the point, you know. So it's really important that you read the Bible contextually. It's really important that you don't add to what you see there, and read it and think, like, is this the best argument for aliens? If there's any other passages you're thinking about, think about it logically. It's probably not. You know, it's probably a hippo or an elephant or something. You know, I don't know, but it's probably not. There's very little biblical evidence that we've seen for aliens, and there's very little physical evidence, so we don't think that the Bible says that. But the big thing to take away from this is look, you might conjecture about aliens. It might be fun for you to look into it, but you have to recognize that human beings, your neighbors, the people around you, those are the people in whom God has placed His image, and those are the people that are our neighbors that we minister to and live among every day. So care about them and love them and be as interested in them as you are aliens. Yeah.
That's true. I'll say one last thing. It's fun to have random speculative conversations about random things. It can be fun. But many of us have the propensity to take it to a place where it goes beyond fun to now informing how we think in a very unhelpful way. And the Apostle Paul very clearly in 1 Timothy chapter 1, he tells Timothy, hey, Timothy, don't let anyone in your church promote things that cultivate conjecture. If there's something going on in your church that causes a lot of people to speculate about something, that thing is probably going to cause some damage to your church down the road. So don't let that go on in your church, Timothy. Be very careful. And so I would say that whether it's aliens or anything else out there, be careful that you don't allow too much conjecture, because the Apostle Paul tells us that could be a seed of some division or potentially just cause us to not think straight in some ways. Right. We want to be careful with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed this conversation, a little bit more lively of a topic than our typical topics, but we hope you enjoyed it. We love talking about discipleship, theology, really Christian questions. So if you love stuff like this, hit follow. We keep having these conversations, and if you've got some kind of thoughts you want to share with us, put them in the comments. We read through all of them. We respond to them. And they're super helpful. I mean, they're helpful for us to get to know you, who's watching, and your thoughts and how this landed on you. So leave us your thoughts below. Subscribe if you like talking about discipleship, theology. And we'll see you guys in the next episode.
And don't forget to watch Independence Day. Best alien movie ever.